more than willing, because I want to be wrong. It's like I want to be like, in the sense that maybe not. I said that and I'm like, wait a minute.
You're willing to admit you're wrong?
Yeah, I'm willing
with that, or
I'm willing to admit I'm wrong with that stuff. Like when I say I want to be wrong, I don't want to be like, if we step away from it, I want the world to collapse. Like no, not like that. I don't know how I wanted to put it. Not thinking about it. It's like. Is this like trying to go off of what that one guy does, where he's like, debate me?
No, it's kind of the opposite of that, actually.
Oh?
So, the idea is don't debate me, but I guess if you want me to debate you, I can, but it's not really good.
We're just talking about like anything.
It's helpful if it's something that's important to you.
I see.
So what I'm doing is something called street epistemology, which is a fancy term for having conversations with people about something that they believe is true in a respectful way, where we will explore the reasons and the methods that get you to your belief, and hopefully we can critically reflect on those and explore whether those are good enough reasons to support the confidence that you have in your position. So does that sound okay?
That sounds good.
Cool. Let me just adjust some stuff.
I just gotta think of something. I'm like, I wasn't ready for all this. I was like, what's going on over there?
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's maybe more involved than you were originally planning on, but that's okay.
That's all right.
All right, cool. Make sure my mic is picking up, so we should be good. I think that everything should be recording. So first of all, hi, I'm Nate.
Nice to meet you, Nate. I'm Ash.
Ash, A-S-H?
A-S-H.
A-S-H, Ash. All right, cool.
Full name is Ash Den, but people just call me Ash.
All right, if you prefer Ash, then that's what we'll call you, okay?
That's all right.
Cool. All right, and so Ash, is there something that you believe is true about the world we share that you would like to explore today?
Something that I find true about the world we share. Well, there's plenty of things that I feel like are true about the world we share. I feel like,
Yeah.
are we talking about like the whole world or like in this country alone? Because that's two different topics in my head.
It's really entirely up to you. So it just helps with something that's meaningful to you. Something that if you changed your mind about it in the future, could potentially change your behavior. So I've talked to people about political beliefs, certain policies. Could talk about foreign affairs. There's a lot going on with foreign affairs right now. I've talked to people about religious beliefs, beliefs in particular religions, particular gods, karma,
Just
ghosts.
all kinds of everything.
It could be anything that you think is true. So especially anything that's important to you. Any of those sound good, or do you want me to try to help you out? Or
No, I'm just thinking really.
Yeah, that's
like,
fine.
How political do I want to get? sort of deal. Probably like right now, the thing that's on my mind, like as of recent, is like I want the U.S. to stop being like the world's police.
Okay. So you want the U.S. to stop being the world's police. So ostensibly that means you believe the U.S. acts as if it is the world's police?
I think so. We have bases in pretty much every country around the world. I recently talked to somebody who's in the military. He's a medic in the army. And it's like we have bases in like most of Europe, I'm sure you know, a lot of Asian like places we have military bases, and we staff a majority of their military because they put their funding into other things, which I kind of think we should do as well. Like take a look, because we spend about 65% of the national yearly budget on the military, which I think is a little much. Like only like 1% of that goes to like education, healthcare, and like agriculture. And I think that's kind of why like even infrastructure is less than like I believe 5% of the national budget. So it's like I think if we put more funding into those things, we'd have a stronger core as a nation, and it's not just like so militaristic. Okay.
And we can come back to some of those reasons if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
So there's a few different ways we can approach this. We could look at the belief that the U.S. currently behaves as if it's the world's police. Or we could look at your belief that the U.S. should stop behaving like that, and why you think that it should, and what benefits you might see if U.S. foreign policy changed.
Yeah.
Which of those sounds more interesting to you?
I think more interesting. I think right now, I think we do like. I think as like the grainish. I think most people would say the U.S. is the world's police. Not as like we were elected as a. We kind of were like we are the world's police, and we're proud to like state that. And a lot of even like the whole Africa thing, where we were like pushing for like LGBTQ gay rights in Africa. It's like, yeah, those are people obviously, and it's fucked up what happens to those kind of. Can I curse on here?
Oh, it's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's YouTube. It's okay.
Yeah, I was like, that's messed up that like, you know, people die just for being gay. It's like I've known people who come from like Libya and like parts of Zimbabwe who they've moved here to America because they couldn't tell their family or friends that they were gay because they'd get killed and beaten to death. And it's like that's a whole experience to be like, you've come from that nation and everyone you've known and loved is now just going to kill you essentially for being who you are. And it's like, I get that. At the same time, that's not really our place as another country to be like, don't do that. Because now we have a lot of African nations mad at America for pushing into their politics and their own political affairs as well. And they're like, we're getting a lot of backlash from those nations.
Okay. So it sounds like you're really confident that the United States acts as if it's the world's police. How confident would you say that you are that is true?
I'd say at a scale from like 1 to 10, I wouldn't say a full 10, but I'd say like a 7.
Okay, so like 7 out of 10 that the U.S. At least engages in foreign policy as if it were the world's police, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's like with the Ukraine-Russia war, we're sending a lot of equipment to the Ukraine, which I get. I know the recent Palestinian-Israeli conflict has been going on forever, which is like a whole giant can of worms, which I really don't want to get into.
Okay, we can go as far into it as you're willing to.
Yeah.
Unless it winds up showing itself to be something really important, and why you believe this. In which case, maybe we should. We should. But
Yeah.
you know, we can stop at any point, and if at any point you start feeling uncomfortable,
Yeah, no.
we can stop. You
100%.
just let me know. Okay. So it sounds like a few things that you have identified for why you believe that this is the case currently. One is funding. You talked about like the amount of the United States budget that's spent on like military, especially like military overseas, and
Yeah.
and staffing the military like almost 4 other countries and having bases all over the place.
Yeah.
And then you talked about just U.S. foreign policy, like trying to get involved in other countries and like influence them, like what you're talking about with Africa and LGBTQ rights. Or?
Africa, like you can go back as far as like the 60s, like Bay of Pigs, Cuba, where it's like Nixon's containment plan of communism, where it's like we just don't be this political ideal. Like Vietnam is still, you know, communist. I'm sure you know, because we failed there. But
Right.
But it's like I'm not trying to look back in like history because it's like history's important, obviously, but to the modern day, I feel
Yeah,
like
it seems like this is the current belief that you think is currently true. The
currently.
U.S. still behaves this way.
It's to this day, I feel like the U.S. still behaves this way, and I feel like some people might disagree with that, some people might agree, but I do lean more heavily towards like people believe the U.S. acts as the world police sort of deal.
Okay. People believe the world acts as the U.S. Or, sorry, people believe the U.S. acts as the world police, or the U.S. does act as the world police.
I think it's a little bit of both. Like I said earlier, I think people really believe that, and at the same time, we kind of put ourselves in this in the shoes of that position to be like, we are the world police. Like
it seems like it's a reasonable conclusion to you.
Yeah, it's like we kind of go around providing aid to like Africa again, and then besides like that one thing, like we do provide aid to those nations. We provide, you know, like with the Red Cross and everything. Well, the Red Cross is more like a global organization than anything, but it's like we go out there and we send volunteers to these like third world nations, even like some European nations, as like aid, like whether it be like military funding, infrastructural funding, like scientific funding, just all sorts of things we like pump into all these kind of nations, which I could get as like wanting to build up the world and come together, but I just can't see the U.S. doing it because of that, and more just wanting to somehow make a buck out of it.
Okay, so maybe that's something else we could talk about is the motivations for doing all this. So I think if it's okay with you, I'm going to kind of take the conversation two different directions.
Yeah,
First, I
go
just
for
want to evaluate this belief that the U.S. behaves as the world's police, and then we can talk about whether they should or not. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So is there something that you could learn or something that you could see happen in the future that would make you even more confident that the U.S. is the world's police, higher than a 7 out of 10?
If we get involved in either of the two wars going on right now, I feel like at that point, I think more Russia-Ukraine war than anything. That would devolve into a world war. But if we were to step into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict more than we already are, I think that would imply that we are kind of like a more world police than...
that the U.S. maybe even sees itself more that way.
Yeah.
Okay. So more involvement, further involvement, especially militaristically.
Yeah. So
Okay, that could increase your
coming in to be
confidence.
like, put their foot down like, hey, knock that off.
Yeah.
When it's like, it's not really our place to say anything.
Okay. What would make you possibly less confident? Something that you could learn either about current foreign policy or something that might change or that you could see in the future that would make you think, maybe the U.S. isn't the world police. 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10.
Maybe we started to like pull back from being so invested in other nations' like business, where it's like we're not always so, I guess, deep into whatever everyone else is doing. When like I want the U.S. to kind of look in its own problems, which I feel like we're neglecting to do currently. It's like the homeless epidemic, the opioid epidemic. It's like the way the economy is. Where like we have all these major problems in the U.S. that we're not tackling, and we keep looking at like other nations and being like, hey, they're doing this bad, we should help you, when we as a nation we're kind of like falling apart a little bit.
Okay. So if you possibly didn't see the U.S. get involved further in Ukraine or in Israel-Palestine, or maybe even cut back on aid to some countries, or if funding shifted so that there was less being spent on the military, especially the military abroad.
Yeah.
If you saw those sorts of things happen, would that decrease your confidence that the U.S. is the world's police?
Yeah, I think so. But it's like all those things like tie into each other so much that it's like I just could never. I can't see myself, not myself, but I can't see as a nation us doing that.
Okay. So if you saw that, it would make you less confident, but you really don't think it's going to happen.
I don't.
Right.
I think a lot of those nations really rely on our help to do those things, and it's like from a moral standpoint, I get why we're doing that.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's hard to explain.
Yeah. Well, I think that might be a good place to go ahead and shift the conversation a little bit.
if you
Talking
want.
about from a moral standpoint, right? So kind of discuss this what's grounding your belief that the U.S. acts like the world's police, but the follow-up belief is that the U.S. should stop acting like the world's police, right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned something about like from a moral standpoint. Do you think there's a certain level of involvement that the U.S. has a moral obligation to get itself involved in international politics and foreign affairs?
I don't mind when we're helping people that really need the help. Like, that makes sense to me. It's like, if a country is really struggling and they're like, please, we just need anything we can just to get by as like as an individual, as a nation, because our country's just
Like
in that
humanitarian aid, that sort of thing?
It's like, that's fine. I agree with that completely. But to be like, you should change your policies and laws because we say so and we think it's bad, and then invade like culturally, is kind of like, that's where I might draw the line, to be like, that's not up to us. That's up to that nation to work through its own like cultures. Because then if you keep forcing something on somebody to be like, hey, don't do this because we believe it and it's against our beliefs, but their beliefs say it's okay, then at that point it's never going to happen.
This feels more like coercion at that point, maybe.
Yeah.
And do you view coercion as less effective way of maybe getting the change you want than maybe some other method?
I think so too. Like, it's like, imagine if you were like a big atheist, for say, and I would and I really wanted to push Christianity. If I came to you every single day and went, you should be a Christian, I'd like read the Bible to you or whatever, or like just kept like throwing it at you. Eventually, you'd just be like, you'd be so like not disgusted with me, or just like oh, shut up about it. It's not even Christianity itself that you're angry at. It's just angry at this one individual, and you're like, you know what? I don't care anymore. Like, I'm never gonna listen to that because it just seems like people who are like that just keep bombarding me with that kind of nonsense.
And so similarly then, if it feels like to another country that the U.S. is constantly trying to coerce them into changing their laws or changing their culture, they'll actually become more resistant to that.
Yeah, there's gonna be more pushback against it because they're not coming to you with like, hey, we believe like so and so, like this should happen, but it's like when you're talking to somebody, I feel like it should be like up to you, because then it's like, oh, it's up to me. It's not I'm forcing you to do it.
Yeah. Is there a way that the U.S. could maybe try to bring about the change that it wants to see in the world through non-coercive means? Is there an alternative way to do that?
I'd say so. But it's like, because I think more on like the individual level, but at that point it's more like national, like country on country level. So it's like I don't know, because I don't have that kind of experience.
Okay.
To be like, how would the U.S. do that thing? It's like, would they send like political advisors to go over there and talk with their political advisors, and then that turns into those people from that nation have to like go down the chain of like mayors or like governors or anything, and like convince the populace that this is a good idea, and then that's like a years long endeavor. It's like, who knows how long that's going to take, but if we could do those like steps to change these things for the better, we probably should, you know.
Okay. So maybe there is, like you were talking before, maybe in certain situations it would still be moral to try to enact those changes.
Yeah.
But maybe the way that we're doing it is a problem.
I think so.
Am I capturing what you're saying correctly, or correct me if I'm wrong?
No, you're fine. Yeah, it's like I feel like that's essentially what I'm trying to say. It's like what we're doing in principle seems right on paper, but the way our actions leading to it just don't seem like they're matching what we want to do.
Okay.
It's like we want to bring about like peace and goodwill and change, but we're going about it in like a kind of a hostile way. So it's like we're getting a lot of pushback in the process.
Is part of that the kind of military thing that you see? Like, is that part of the issue? Like when you see like military arms and arming other countries, and
I think
is that part of the issue?
I think those are, in my head, those are two different problems. I think just as a nation, as a people, like America's very like outgoing, and like we're very like firm on what we believe in, and very easily be like to speak our own opinion and be like, I want this and this is how I want it, where a lot of nations, even like European nations, they're a lot more docile with that at times, where they're a lot more polite and like, oh, like they're not willing to, not willing, but yeah, probably not willing as much to say what they really mean at times, whereas Americans, I feel like, definitely are like, I feel this way, and like that is it, that is the law in their heart.
Okay. A little bit more upfront about things to some extent.
And to a lot of people that could be a little intimidating or too much at times, to be like they're not ready for it or expecting it.
Okay. Would you say that it's not necessarily wrong that the U.S. acts as the world police, in that it's trying to bring about the change in the world that it wants? Is it more a problem with that, or is the problem with how it's going about doing that?
I think it's more how about we're doing it.
Okay.
It's like, I just don't want to see us meddling in other countries' business when we don't really need to be there, but providing aid for things, obviously I don't mind. I think that's good. If
the U.S. was more like the world's guidance counselor rather than the world police, would you be happier with that?
Probably a little happier with that. You know, not so much like trying to enforce different things with education, more like, we're here to help you sort of deal.
Yeah.
That's sort of, I feel like, wishful thinking at times.
So you don't have issues necessarily with like humanitarian aid, or maybe providing funding to other countries.
Yeah, when they need them.
The problem is the way that we're going about it. You kind of see it as coercive. Maybe some of the issues are with providing military aid as opposed to like humanitarian aid. Does that sound kind of right?
A little bit. I think personally, I'm upset about how much we spend on the military. Like, I just think like 65% is just so much of the yearly national budget to go to the military. Yeah. When military generals and advisors have come to like Senate and Congress and been like, we don't need like 55 more like Apache helicopters, and they're like, you need them, and they give them to them anyway.
Yeah. If you were to either learn that number, that 65%, is actually lower, or if in the future
it did lower,
I'd
be happy.
Would that would maybe change your?
I'd be happy about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I check it. It's the one thing that makes me just like, it makes my blood boil a little bit. Where it's like 2020 to 2023, it was like 60%, and I think last year, the year before, it was 5% higher. So that's why I'm like, during COVID, we spent 5% more on the military, despite the economic like struggle and pandemic we were in. I'm like, why? Why are we doing that?
Okay. All right. So, let me just kind of try to summarize kind of what I've heard and make sure that it sounds accurate to you, right? The U.S. acts as the world's police, and you're at like maybe a 7 out of 10 confidence with that. You see, mostly it's because of this military funding.
Yeah.
What you see as disproportionate amount of money spent on the military, and especially seeing military operations in other countries and kind of getting involved where you don't think that we really necessarily need to be. And sometimes, though, you see it is appropriate to get involved.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to like providing humanitarian aid for other countries. And maybe if we kind of went about things a little bit differently, where it didn't seem so coercive, you'd be more okay with the U.S. still being maybe highly involved in foreign affairs and international politics?
Maybe not like highly, but like moderately involved.
Okay.
Like, involved.
Still
like,
a little less involved than we are
like
currently.
not to the point where like we're still like sticking our nose in like what are you doing over there? Like can we know about it sort of deal? Like a newsy neighbor. That's how I kind of feel like in like the broadest terms. I feel like the U.S. acts sometimes like a newsy neighbor, where we come in here and we're like, if that was me, this is what I would do. And we're like, shut up. Like this is what we're doing as a country.
Okay. In what sort of situation do you think it is appropriate for the U.S. to be involved in another country's business militarily?
Probably, right now, I would say like the Russia-Ukraine war, when Russia's threatening to like blow up everybody just because they're losing the war. And they're like, and Putin's so old and decrepit at this point where he's like, he clearly is ill and has something wrong with him, but they're doing their best to hide that fact. It's like Hitler at the end of World War II, where he's all shaky with Parkinson's and all hopped up on drugs. And they're like, no, he's fine, we promise. In reality, he's not okay.
Okay, so I don't know if I caught quite all of that. So is it because of the threat level from Russia?
Yeah, I think that's because Russia is posing a threat not just to Ukraine at this point, but they're threatening all of NATO and like the EU and even like Asian nations, and like China even backed away. They're like, we're not buddy with them anymore, sort of deal. And it's like the U.S. has now been threatened a couple of times by Russia. If we furtherly involve ourselves with the Ukraine war, they're going to take military actions against us, which I think is a bluff. Because if they're losing to the Ukraine and it goes to war with all of NATO and the U.S., they'll probably lose.
Okay.
And
so do you think the current situation with the U.S. and NATO and other countries supplying tanks and defense systems and missiles and equipment to Ukraine, is that an appropriate action currently, or?
I'd say yeah. I would say yeah, only because it's a defensive war against like basically a tyrannical government trying to just to eat another nation because they want to.
Okay, so if the U.S. is involved militarily to support countries who we kind of see as being on the defensive, who are maybe that we judge to be in the right, then it's like, okay?
Yes and no. Okay. Yes, because I'd say it's very situational, because if we're taking it as from what we think is right, then that can really be a can of worms of like, okay, well, we think this nation is right, and it's like other nations might disagree. It's like, I'm going to dip my feet in the current Middle Eastern conflict a little bit, where it's like, we believe Israel is right, even though at the end of the war, like World War II, Palestine already had that like land, and we kind of went, we're cutting your country in half, they live here now. And it's like, okay, I can see why the Palestinians would be mad at that. And there's a map of it, it's really interesting, where over the course of the year up to the modern day, you can see just how much Israel has like snaked into their land and taken it and claimed it as their own, and basically pushed that whole nation into a corner and said, we are now the majority of this nation, we live here now. And it's like, I'm Jewish by blood. So it's like, but even me, I'm like, I don't really agree with what Israel is doing to Palestine. The Gaza Strip is uninhabitable. The average age in Gaza is 18 years old, and they have less than 3% drinking water. They're stopping the Red Cross from coming into Gaza to provide aid for them because Israel claims they're all terrorists in there, when it's just that one cell. What was their name?
Hamas?
Hamas. Yeah. When it's like, Hamas is basically using equipment like decades ago, which is still horrible. Like the death on either side is horrible, and I don't agree.
Yeah, it's a complicated situation.
Yeah, I don't agree with it. But it's like Israel is being funded by like heavily funded by America. We're giving them top-of-the-line equipment to fight Hamas, and Hamas has like nothing to work with, obviously. And it's like even just the people itself. And there was one conflict that made me kind of like upset, where it was Israeli SWAT team went into a mosque, I believe, is what their place of worship is called, and they shot people with like non-lethal like beanbag guns and like paintball guns and everything because they were just in there like praying, and they were like, no, this is Israeli land, and Hamas came out and said, we're going to bomb you if you don't apologize for that, and the Israeli government was like, we're not apologizing for that, and then they got bombed, and they were like, oh my god, Hamas, and I'm like, if you just apologized, you wouldn't have gotten shot, which is like obviously an extreme to take. It's like, that's ridiculous, you shouldn't do that. But at the same time, all you had to do was apologize and that wouldn't have happened. Then why didn't you do it?
Kind of what I'm hearing, just to kind of bird's eye view that, is that maybe the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's a little less clear to you who's in the right.
Yeah,
is that kind of what you're saying?
Like,
as opposed to like Ukraine, Russia, it seems very obvious that
it's like
Russia is the wrongdoer.
Russia is clearly like the hostile entity coming in, being like, we just want Ukraine because it was once part of the Soviet Union, and it's like Putin was part of the KGB, and he's very Stalinist in his ideals, so he wants to kind of rekindle the old Union and bring it back to life, I feel like. Whereas Palestine-Israel conflict is more like, at the end of World War II, we kind of were like, here's this land because of the Holocaust, and we don't know where to really put you. And then Palestine was like, wait, we lived here for like years. What are you doing? And they were like, just deal with it.
Yeah. So would you say that if you could have your way, where the U.S. is acting less like the world's police, that the U.S. would continue to support Ukraine, but maybe would not get involved very directly in like conflicts more like Israel,
more complicated conflicts, because it's like NATO, for example, is on the side of Palestine, because they're like, what you're doing to these people is so inhumane and wrong that they can't even like live. They are stopping fresh water from coming into like the Gaza or even other parts of Palestine just because they don't want them to have it, and that's horrible. It's like they can't drink, they can't shower, they can't really use any of the utilities. They barely have food. It's I think absolutely awful what's happening in Gaza, and then just for Israel to be like, well, they're terrorists, when they're not all terrorists or part of Hamas, I feel like then makes people more willing to join Hamas because they're getting pushed into a corner.
Counterproductive.
Yeah, and it's like, I know right now there is a little bit of political discourse in Israel because the people currently don't agree with the current, not governor.
Prime Minister,
okay. Thank you. And because there was a conflict going on where Hamas just walked across the border, like they were like not even like they snuck in or they flew over or whatever. They just drove across the border casually, and they shot up a bunch of Israelis, which is horrible. But the reason they're mad
a couple weeks ago or whatever,
the reason they're mad at the current prime minister is because the police and military weren't there to stop it, and they're like across like probably the most heavily guarded border besides like Korea, like in the world right now, and they just casually went across it and did like horrible acts. They're like, what are you guys doing? Maybe this isn't what we should be doing as a nation. So it's like, even on the inside, from Israelis' point of view, it's like they're having political discourse from their own people.
Yeah.
Of like how the conflict should be going.
Yeah, it's definitely a very complicated situation.
Yeah.
And so what it sounds like you're saying is that those kind of really complicated situations, the U.S. should at least be very careful, very cautious, very hesitant to get involved. Yeah. Would that be fair?
I'd say so. Okay. It's like we definitely, I think, cemented or solidified our stance in that war because we recognize Israel as a nation. And it's like, I know like a lot of Middle Eastern nations don't recognize Israel as a formal nation, and a lot of nations like in the West do. So it's like we recognize them as a nation, so we've already kind of been like, we already are on like the fence of good relations with like Iraq, Iran, like Saudi Arabia, nations like that, more like Muslim Middle Eastern nations, who already see the U.S. kind of as like not a tyrant, but more just kind of like how would I put it?
The world police. No, something else.
No, something else. Probably just a tyrant. I'd say
the Great Satan.
Maybe.
So I think I just have a couple more questions for you about
it.
this. Thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah, of course.
What could you learn or see in the future that would make you less confident that the U.S. should pull back in its involvement?
Pull back.
Or
From
like
both,
stop being
like,
so much of the world police, maybe.
Like generally, or like any of those conflicts we talked about.
Not these specific ones, although maybe something with one of these specific conflicts could be something that could change your mind. But
Yeah.
what could basically change your mind?
Mm-hmm.
What could you learn in the future that would make you think, you know what, maybe it's all right that the U.S. is the world police?
If put into practice, and we like, I'd say do a trial run. Have like a year or two where we step away from doing that, see what happens, and if the world falls apart like we think it's gonna, because we're not acting as the police, then I'd be like, okay, we actually have to do this, because if we don't do it, the world's gonna fall in on itself.
Okay.
But if we step away from it and we're like, oh, it's actually not as bad as we thought, and we're just overreacting, then I'd be like, say it's fine.
Okay, so
like,
some outcomes-based results, like if you actually saw the U.S. be a little bit more isolationist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the right word for what you're saying, but isolationist might be too far,
yeah,
too strong.
I don't want to go back to like the 30s where we're like, no conflict, period. We don't care. Like involve when we can and when we need to, but not as heavily as I think we are.
But yeah, if we became a little bit more that direction, a little less heavily involved, and then if you saw good outcomes, then maybe you'd be more confident in your position. If you saw worse outcomes,
go back into it. I'd be more than willing, because I want to be wrong. It's like I want to be like, in the sense that maybe not. I said that. I'm like, wait a minute.
You're willing to admit you're wrong.
Yeah, I'm willing
to that, or
I'm willing to admit I'm wrong with that stuff. Like when I say I want to be wrong, I don't want to be like, if we step away from it, I want the world to collapse. Like no, not like that. I don't know how I wanted to put it. Not thinking about it. It's like,
you don't want to be wrong about it, but if you are, you're willing to admit it, that sort of thing. Like,
it's like I don't want to be wrong about it, because it's like ideally I'm like, obviously I want to think positive about it, and like I want to have that sort of like goodwill towards it. It's like if we step away from it, things will be fine. But it's like if it's not, I'm going to be like, okay, I was wrong, because it's like I don't know fully about the topic. Like I know, like I'd say like maybe 50%. Of like I feel like I'm like moderately informed, let's say, than like versus other people about the situation.
I actually didn't ask that question. So talking about how informed you are, you were at a 7 out of 10 that the U.S. is the world's police. How confident are you that the U.S. should decrease its role?
I'd say probably say like a 6 or 7 out of 10 still, like should decrease. And like I say I'm moderately informed, but it's like I feel like at times I might be more, because when I talk to like other people about these situations and topics, like I feel like they know so little about what's going on outside of America, because it's like I feel like most Americans don't care about foreign policy in general. It's mainly the government stance on it that we take, and then when we come back and we ask like normal people these questions, they're like, who cares? It doesn't affect me. Why should I care? Where it's like I kind of care a little bit, and when I put my time and feet more into that like pool of knowledge, because I like to know stuff. Why not? And it's like I think it helps as an individual as well as a nation that the majority of people should know that information, because it's still beneficial to know. So that way you can take a stance, not to be like just the government comes back to you and goes, take this stance because we know. And you're like, okay, what do I know?
So the more information, the more better informed you are, right? And so if you got more information that confirmed to you what you're already thinking, then maybe that'd make you more confident. But if you got more information that kind of falsified the ideas that you have, or went against your current understanding, then you would want to update your beliefs in light of that new information too.
Yeah, it's sort of like until I'm gonna say a few weeks ago, until I talked to that man who's in the military about what we spent, because I didn't know. I knew we spent around 60 to 65% of the budget on the military, but I didn't know what specifically on. You know what I mean? So it's like he said around 30% of the budget is put into, like, out of that 60% is put into basing other like stations around the world, like in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East, like troops and equipment in those nations. 30% of that 60% is put towards that. So if we were to pull out of those nations completely, we cut that budget in half, and then we'd have 30 to 35% to work with in terms of like the U.S. like put it back into other things, sort of deal.
Gotcha.
So it's like that. I think makes sense to me to do that a little bit, but
like all the way out or a little bit.
Because it depends. Because like I said, it depends. Because a lot of like Germany, for example, we fund like not fund, but we base a lot of like their nation. So it's like, and they like pay us to do that pretty much with like whatever means. So if we were to do that, that might get them all riled up and be like, why are you doing that with the current conflicts going on, sort of deal.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a real just like
that sort of thing. Do you think would it need like a transition period, like a training and
like
transition?
to build up of that nation's military to the point where they feel comfortable, and then we pull out, not just like abrupt like a band-aid. All right, we're gone.
Yeah.
Like don't do that, because that's just like what, and then that whole nation's like not staffed, not like they have to just quickly train people and like have equipment like on hand like at the moment, which I feel like most nations aren't gonna have.
This just brought up a question in my mind, because we kind of saw something like that in Afghanistan a few years ago. What are your thoughts on what happened there? And that there was this long drawn out process to train and staff up Afghanistan's police and military, and kind of saw how that went. What do you think about all that?
Well, it's like, firstly, we've been in Afghanistan since the Bush administration, like for just so long. We shouldn't have been there to begin with. And it's like, I feel like most people know why we were there. It's for the oil. It's like there was no other real reason we were there. It's like the Taliban, but it's like not really. Come on now. It's like, it's like we put troops around that. We kind of claimed it for the U.S. It's like that's our oil sort of deal. But to modern, like to now, when I was like, all right, we're pulling all of our troops out. We're getting them out of there, and they didn't have time to train those things, and then the Taliban kind of came in, raided these abandoned military bases, and like took this equipment, and now they just have like Humvees and like Amtraks and everything, and like U.S. guns and like munitions. That kind of just was like it put on the. You said what? Iran?
Or we're talking about Afghanistan.
Afghanistan,
I think, right?
yeah. I know it's horrible to say, but it's like Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan. They're just like a mush in my brain, which is absolutely horrible to say, but it just is.
One of those things to be more educated on or whatever.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So you see that as maybe like the idea isn't bad, but the execution was poor?
At that point, it was like
fair?
The idea is not bad. I don't think we should be in like countries we shouldn't be in, especially just like conducting military acts for the sake of we want to. But the execution of we're just pulling out now. Like it's like just like the Band-Aid thing like I said earlier, just like we're just gone. Then people were like, we weren't ready for that. Now our whole country's in disarray. We don't have a police force here or properly trained enough to deal with this threat now. So it's like I said, if we were to do that and like properly train people and give them the resources to do it on their own and then pull out and not be as involved, I think that would be good.
Okay. All right. Well, I feel like I have a better understanding of your view. Hopefully it allowed you to reflect a little bit and think about what you could learn in the future that could modify your view a little bit. Do you feel like that happened?
I do. I think I can definitely look back and see where I may have been wrong during the conversation, or may just be like, I never really thought about that fully yet, and I'm going to probably go home and dive more into that.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Hopefully opportunities for more things to look into.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions for me right now?
What are your beliefs on all that? Because I feel like it's just kind of been me rambling a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like in general it's very complicated. I think I'm similar with you that the U.S. does behave as if it's the world's police. And I might be even more confident than you are that the U.S. acts like that.
Yeah.
Kind of fills that role. But I'm not as confident in that we need to necessarily withdraw more. I think in some ways, yes. In some ways, I agree. I think we overspend on the military. I think we could still be involved in foreign policy, do good in the world, influence the world positively through much, but still like fund the military much less. I think that part of what we were talking about with it's not necessarily the intention, it's the way, it's the how we're doing it. Is maybe not the best thing. So I think I'm in a similar place to you. Might be maybe slightly different, maybe for slightly different reasons.
Yeah.
There's certain things you said that I agreed with, certain things I disagreed with, some things I just don't know enough about to really feel strongly one way or the other. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things where it's very complicated. I'm not an expert in it.
Yeah.
So and whenever I know that something is really complicated and I know that I'm not an expert in it, I'm gonna generally have a low amount of confidence in whatever I think is right.
Yeah, it's like that's why I like to be kind of well informed on situations because I'm not an expert either. I mean, we're both not experts in any of this field.
Yeah.
But it's like if I had just more information to go off of and to work with, then I could base an opinion more now that I know more about it.
Yeah, and I think like 6, 7 out of 10 confidence for those sorts of things where, you know, you've got your beliefs, you got your opinions, but you recognize that there are a lot of holes in your knowledge.
Yeah.
I think 6, 7 confidence, I got no problem with that.
Yeah.
That seems appropriate.
Yeah, it's like I like having dialogue and conversations like this because it's like it makes me feel like I'm still learning things as I'm like going through talking. Then it's like I get your take on it too. That might further my knowledge or might make me think about things a different way and just broaden my look on things.
Awesome, cool. Well, Ash, hey,
Yeah.
it was a pleasure talking to you.
It was a pleasure talking to you too, man.
Yeah, so what I'm doing is called Street Epistemology, and it's all about being able to have these kind of respectful discussions with people about things that are important to them in a way where we can explore it and I can ask you tough questions about it.
Yeah, of course.
But you don't feel attacked or we don't feel like we're in any sort of
one
fight or
bit.
argument. So
No, I like being able to sit down and have like a full like civil like discussion or just talk about a topic like this because it's interesting to me. I do like it. I think it's good. I think everyone should have these kind of talks like this all the time. Not all the time, but like in moderation. But it's like, at no point where you were like berating me or being like, well, your opinion is wrong because I believe like X, Y, Z sort of deal, like making me feel like shit sort of deal, which isn't constructive, I think, to any form of discussion.
Yeah, and I try to be neutral. I don't know if you could tell at all what my opinion was during the conversation.
No, I definitely feel like you took a more like listening and like you were taking notes sort of deal and like asking me sort of just like not vague questions, but like, could you elaborate on this sort of deal? Which isn't bad. Like then it's like okay, and then I could elaborate on that or think more about it and like develop more of my opinion, and or just even present it to you more during the conversation. Yeah.
Cool, awesome. All right. Well, did you get candy with my card on it yet?
Yeah, I have your card right here in my pocket.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks for sitting down for the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man.
And I got a quick gift for you, real quick. So this is a little stress ball with the Street Epistemology logo on there. Take one of those, whichever color you like.
Take the blue.
All right. And if you see me again and come back and have another conversation with me, you can get the other two. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video all the way to the end. I hope you found it thought-provoking, or at least entertaining. If you appreciate the content and tone of what I'm producing, please consider liking this video, subscribing to my channel, and ringing the bell to be notified when I release a new video. Your support helps me continue creating more videos like this one. I also encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments section. Respectful discourse centered on constructive criticism goes a long way toward helping me improve. Please remember to be kind to everyone featured in the video, just as I am to be when practicing street epistemology. Stay curious and keep questioning.